October began with Iran firing hundreds of missiles at Israel. Fears of the next stage of war were unlocked immediately. Days later, a so-called suspicious earthquake has only added to the speculations. Now, while Tehran and Tel Aviv grandstand, vowing bloody revenge, diplomacy has taken a backseat and nuclear war may be looming large. Will Israeli forces soon target Iran's nuclear facilities? For over 20 years, Israeli forces have meticulously prepared for a confrontation of this scale. Yet, despite the grandstanding, the conflict in ever-expanding Middle East conflict has thrown up one question: can Israel do it alone? Now, the fact remains, despite meticulous planning, Israel faces several formidable obstacles in targeting Iran's heavily fortified nuclear facilities. Deep underneath the deserts of Iran, hidden from prying eyes, out of Mossad's sights even, where exactly are Iran's nuclear facilities? Now, while Israeli forces have previously conducted drills to simulate such an operation, as per reports, the odds of success without US's intervention appear slim. United States President Biden has already cautioned Israel against such a strike, advising that any retaliation must be proportionate. Now, this brings us to some very crucial questions. Is Israel willing to risk an all-out war by targeting Iran's nuclear sites? Can Israel rely solely on its air force to carry out this complex mission? If an attack does follow, will US be forced to step in for its ally? Now, could a preemptive strike trigger a broader regional conflict? What happens if the United States does step into the bloody Middle East mess? Now, reports suggest Israel's initial retaliation for Iran's October 1 attack will focus on military bases and intelligence centers rather than nuclear facilities. Israeli officials believe these targets will send a strong message without escalating the conflict too quickly. Military analysts warn that Iran's counter-strike capabilities could provoke a broader regional conflict, forcing Israel to reassess its strategy. Now remember, Israel has long viewed Iran's nuclear ambitions as a direct threat to its existence. 2 years ago, the Israeli Air Force conducted a large-scale drill over the Mediterranean, simulating an attack on Iran's nuclear sites. Now, this exercise wasn't just for show. It was seen as a warning to Iran and a signal to Washington that Israel was prepared to act, even if it means going alone. After all, for over a year since the bloody Al-Aqsa floods, Joe Biden claims to be working day and night to resolve the conflict. And while United States attempts to talk down the two parties, Israel's mission to downgrade Hamas in Gaza has already extended to Lebanon and even Syria. Now, a nightmare scenario seems inevitable where Israel goes to war against Iran. Now, despite its military might, Israel faces daunting obstacles in executing a successful strike on Iran's nuclear facilities. Now, these challenges include: first is distance. Iran's nuclear sites, located more than 1,000 miles from Israel, would require Israeli jets to fly over multiple sovereign nations, making the mission diplomatically and militarily complex. Next comes fuel. Israeli aircraft would need extensive refueling pushing its air force to the limits of its capabilities. Last comes air defenses. Now, Iran's nuclear facilities are heavily guarded. Experts say any attack might require almost a third of Israel's air force just to penetrate the defensive shield around the key nuclear sites. Now, Iran's primary nuclear facilities in Natanz and Fordo are buried deep underground, complicating any potential strike. The Natanz plant has long been the focal point of Israel's attention. However, reports suggest that penetrating the fortified structure would require advanced weapons like the US-developed bunker busters. However, reports indicate Israel's own GBU-31 bombs would be ineffective against these heavily fortified sites. Now, other reports suggest that only the US's massive ordnance penetrator, dropped by a B-2 bomber, could effectively destroy the Fordo facility. Now, while Israel contemplates its next move, diplomatic avenues remain under consideration. For years, the United States has pursued sanctions and diplomacy to disrupt Iran's nuclear program. And though Israel has lobbied for more aggressive measures, Washington has been reluctant to provide Israel with the weapons necessary for a full-scale strike. Now, recent reports indicate that Tehran has increased its production of uranium enriched to 60% purity, which is just short of weapons grade levels. Reports warn that Iran could reach bomb grade material within days, fueling further concerns about an impending nuclear escalation. Now, amid the rising tensions, an earthquake struck Iran's Semnan province on October 5, sending tremors as far as Tehran. Social media erupted with conspiracy theories suggesting that the quake was no ordinary seismic event but potentially a nuclear test. Now, the proximity of the epicenter to Iran's nuclear power plant has raised multiple questions about whether the tremor was a natural disaster or a covert demonstration of Iran's nuclear capabilities. Many have also questioned the depth of the origin of the quake. Now, as Israel weighs its options, the world watches anxiously, aware that any misstep could ignite a wider conflict in the region. Now, will Israel risk everything in a bold strike against Iran's nuclear program? Or will diplomacy and caution prevail in the Middle East? The coming days will reveal how far each side is willing to go, and the stakes couldn't be higher.